So, welcome to Leicester Print Workshop's conversation with Claire Morris-Wright. I'm sure that most of you know Claire's work. She's an artist and printmaker who resolves her work using lots of different techniques and methodologies as ceramics, painting, textiles, and fascinatingly to me, natural inks, dyes, soil, lichen, moss, all that sort of thing within the world of her work. Today's talk is about a local perimeter path behind Claire's home. It's somewhere she's walked for 25 years and in fact described herself as haunting it. So with that sort of context and background in mind, it's going to be a very rich exploration. The project's still underway, so there's still, a way to journey through, and I can't wait to see how it resolves itself. If you're not aware of Claire's website and Instagram pages, then do check them out. They're very rich, very generous pages. It's a cornucopia of beautiful images and insight into Claire's practice. I recommend a good hour or two to go through all that, and I'm sure it's something you will want to go back to. So Claire's work to me seems to focus on a lot of edges, perimeters, borders, maps, paths that have been travelled and not travelled. Her relationship between the land and its growth, transformation, and quiet stubbornness to me is very much built on a series of developing relationships. And if you look at the language that Claire uses, it's all very sort of familial. It's cousins, it's siblings, it's very, there's a loving attitude to the natural world and to the forms found within it that's very appealing on a sort of very instinctive level, I think. There's a connectedness between Claire and the land and her subjects. And I would say it's a gentle but a relentless interrogation of the land, and it resolves itself in such a wide variety of forms, but all have the connected sort of feature of colour and texture, which always echo her topic. I think that's all you need to hear from me about Claire's work, and I'll hand over. Thank you very much for joining LPW here, and it's a real pleasure to welcome Claire, who's one of Leicester Print Workshop's founding members. I'll hand you over to her good hands, and I can't wait to hear about it.
Thank you, Kate. That's really kind. Thank you very much for a lovely introduction like that. Right, so I'm just going to whiz through and just mention the hedge project quickly, because this led into the path project, and just show a couple of pieces of work from the last exhibition. And some of the last pieces that I did for the hedge project were using soil that I dug up from the base of the hedge. And these were some of the pieces that made me think about using the actual body of the land itself. And as Kate mentioned, I walk along this path that's behind the house in this perimeter path, and it's as you can see from the map on the right hand side, it's an old airfield, and the airfield was used in the 1940s Second World War by American and English RAF base. And the remains of it, the concrete remains of it, are the original Perry path, which was where they used to access and help either aircraft that had landed badly or ambulances and things like that. So you can see here this amazing photograph from 1946 that just shows you how big the area is. These are all little tiny vehicles that were parked on the perimeter path. And within the woods itself, there are lots of remains of domestic mess and communal spaces that were part of the RAF base. Now, it took me probably the best part of, I don't know, 8 to 10 months to locate all of this information. spanning around the internet and talking to local people and landowners and things to find a bit about this space, because I had no idea who owned it. It doesn't look like it's got general access at all. It's private land. So it took me quite a while to find out. And I got some information from the Forestry Commission. So the local nuns own a bit of land near it, and Bullock Estates, British Steel, Burley and the Forestry Commission. And the bottom left-hand pink edge there is where the actual land is actually circumferenced by, and Bullock Estates own the blue section at the bottom, which is a big landowner around here. This is a Google Maps aerial view of the forest, which is behind the house, and then the remains of the path, which you can just see curving across the screen now. And this is an aerial view of the concrete strip that you can see. Now it's this concrete strip that actually is the path itself. And it's just an amazing strip of land. It's just very quiet. You get the odd dog walker along it. And it has a changing mood and a seasonal structure to it, basically. And so I walk it at least once a week and see what it shows me, basically. And this is a film that I took of the whole length of the path, which will introduce you to its length, really. And it probably takes me about 10 minutes to walk the length of it. And I discovered that it was owned by the guy on Bullock Estates, and so I arranged to meet him. This was in February of this year, and asked whether he would not scrape it, whether he would leave the path alone for at least a year, so that I could observe how the path changes, because normally he cuts it back and scrapes it with his bulldozer, so he removes all the grass. But normally in spring, the cracks and the gaps that are left by the concrete splitting are filled with these sort of bonsai plants, primroses, violas, all sorts of amazing little plants. So I walk it at least once a week and I photograph it, and I just very, very carefully look at what I see. What I find most fascinating about it is within a natural environment is something incredibly hostile, concrete. But the concrete seems to be giving way to nature. Nature seems to be taking over. But there seems to be a really lovely contrast and relationship between the concrete and nature taking over it. So sometimes it's washed clean by the rain, or the wind sweeps things away. But I just really love the way it's flanked, and where the nature's sort of creeping along the edges and underneath it and on top of it as well. So I suppose it's very evocative, but the whole place is full of metaphors, symbolism, and I try to immerse myself totally in the experience of it as I'm walking along. And there's something quite reassuring about that, the focus of that and the force of nature. Me just watching nature very carefully each week. And there's a real purposefulness about my looking as well. It's an important space for me because of the relationships, the sort of historical relationships, thinking about the soldiers that used to walk along this path as well, and how it was used in the past, and the threads of that, how that feeds back to how I walk along it and the relationship I have with it now. So I try to keep my mental net, my mind, as open as possible, so I'm capturing lots of different things as I'm walking along it. It's also, for me as a woman, it's quite a political act as well to walk alone. I get stopped by people quite often asking why I'm walking alone, why I haven't got a dog with me, why I'm outside basically alone on my own. And so I find that the notion that people see it as a risky venture still quite interesting and intriguing, really. So I read quite a lot about women who walk and the sort of history of walking and the idea of wanderlust and people being in nature. So those sorts of things inform my view and my mindset when I'm there. Books that I found particularly fascinating are Lucy Lippard's Overlay book and Braiding Sweetgrass. Rebecca Solnit's book Wanderlust as well. So they're very informative, and they give me a way through and a picture of how I see the land, really. And not just me, the people use the space as well, which was really frustrating during lockdown because there's too many people along the path, because I'm often just on my own, really. This is also, because it's a shared space, I see it as a horizontal space. So despite what the landowner thinks, I see it as my space, and I feel a real sense of possession over it as well. So other artists like Barbara Hepworth and Carl Andre like the horizontal as well. So I like to look at how other artists view that horizontal. And then we get to the end of the path here. So this is a quote from Alain de Botton. I love philosophy and I like to look at things quite philosophically and think about different aspects of how I'm viewing my practice and my creative thinking, really. So Alain de Botton is one of the philosophers I like reading. And they're good bedfellows. Philosophy and art are really close bedfellows, I think. They're about a way of looking and a way of playing with how you view things. So these are just seasonal views of the path and how it changes, different aspects of it and how the seasons flux and flow through it. This is a really bad photograph, but I like it because it's almost like a fairy tale. It's like a nest rather than a space. And this shows the depth of the path on the left and the right, how nature's taken over the peripath, because underneath all this area is concrete. And the path, this is spring, which is just amazing. In spring, the whole of the path on either side is just flooded with primroses that are the most delicate, most beautiful colour. And I try and go up like 2 or 3 times a week because they're so transient. It's such a sort of tiny part of the season, really. Yeah, and again, the colours, this is in depth of winter, but these bright colours that are shown from the spring. And these are some of the cracks, the beautiful cracks that I've become intimately absorbed by, and the mosses that grow in between the cracks. Mosses are quite amazing, that if they dried up, if they'd been dry for over 50 years, it would only take 20 minutes for them to reabsorb moisture and come back to life again. So the cracks are amazing to me. I love them. And this is a piece of black paper that I took into the print workshop, and I scrunched it up while it was wet, and then put it through the press and left it to dry, and then rolled golden ink over it. And then when the ink was dry, I unrolled it to see what it revealed, basically. So these are just some of all of the pieces of work I'm going to show you are just experiments. They're work in progress. They're sort of thoughts, really. They're not finished pieces. They're just they're gestures. They're just creative gestures of me trying to find out what it is I have learned about the cracks in the path. And this is an old Bible. I did a workshop for the print workshop years ago and met a bishop at the cathedral in Leicester. And she said, oh, if you like old paper, I've got a load of Bibles if you want. So she showed me a room, and this room was full of old books. And so I took 4 boxes, 2 for the print workshop and 2 for me. And because I was brought up a Catholic, I have a particular relationship with religion. And so I use old Bibles for collage and things. These are ink drawings that I did up in the path, at the path of some of the cracks. Just because I like them, as I say, and the sort of relationship that I've grown and developed with them. And these are rubbings of the cracks as well. So I throw literally anything I can at my creative research. I just try anything. And this is a rubbing just to the edges of the path. Quick film showing you the weather, what the weather's like sometimes up there. It can be challenging trying to do paperwork up there, but. And you can see either side of the cracks, there are a host there of lichens that inhabit the concrete, and I'll talk about those later, but they're some of my friends as well. So this is me showing how the cracks move across the concrete, really, and how long some of the cracks are, and how they get fat and thin and widen. And I just liked of this moment here, just tracing the length of a whole crack. And just the way that the leaf litter and little twigs gather either side of the crack. Some more of my ink drawings. Yeah, and you can see some of the little tiny plants that decide to grow in between the cracks. Yeah, and some of these were done during lockdown, and as you know, we couldn't get to shops and things, so I was using bleach and bits of scrap tissue paper that I found in my box of rubbish, just tearing it up really and seeing what happened and bleaching it to try and get some cracks. Yeah, more cracks. So these aren't finished pieces of work. They're just, as I say, they're thoughts and their ways, because I couldn't get into the print workshop and I haven't got a studio or anything. So I'm working either in the garden outside or on the kitchen table, on my lap sometimes. So some of these will disappear, some won't, I don't know. And this is a monoprint. Just of a crack that I drew and then just rolling over the top of a bit of cad foil really. And again, this is a monoprint, looking at cracks. And these were done before all the lockdown rubbish. And these are relief. This is card built up with bits of paper. And it was me thinking about the depth of the cracks and the topography of the cracks and what was under the cracks. And I was wanting to do some blind embossing. So I made, I don't know, a dozen or so of these little plates, thinking about how I would print them and what I wanted to print them. And so these are blind emboss with moss. So I collected moss from the path, dried it out, and then made some moss ink. And as I printed them, these aren't massive, these are sort of like square A4 type size. I liked this sort of idea that they were islands. They looked like little islands to me after I printed them. And I don't know what I'll do with these, but what I particularly liked was the notion of the island and the fact that the moss had, become different colours really. Some of them are more successful than others. And then these are just blind emboss prints, and then I just shoved some charcoal and chalk over the top. Just doing rubbings basically of the blind emboss prints. just to see what happened. And so this is another, this is one of my sort of serendipitous moments where walking along the path, I noticed that there was this sort of scratchy bit and I didn't quite know what it was really. And then one day I caught, on a really windy day, the branch had been sweeping this line along the path. And I just thought it was really precious. There was something very precious about it, and it's disappeared since. So I just stood there and filmed it. So it's just a tiny moment, a little intervention really. And then these are my new friends. These are the cousins of rock pools. And these are tiny, tiny little holes in the concrete that gather the most beautiful bits of nature, tiny bits of stones, the odd leaf, bits of soil, blossom, all sorts of different things. But I've become obsessed with photographing them in different lights and at different times. I've built, this is a bit of bird poo in here, which looked great. I thought it's really juicy. I've built sort of little roundy things. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing with them, so I'm experimenting on different levels. But I love the way that they curate their own exhibitions, and they seem perfectly chosen. Each one seems to fit exactly right. The colours seem to be right, all the shapes seem to work together. They're just ultimately really fascinating to me. There's probably something deeply psychological about it, but anyway, I find them fascinating. The way that they allow particular things to land in them. Some of the photographs are rubbish, I'm sorry about that, but yeah, and I don't move anything at all. I don't place things. I don't curate it myself. I just look at what nature's doing basically and observe it really carefully. And I spend quite a lot of time looking and making sure that I'm paying attention to it. So I look at what it tells me basically. Later on I'll show you, but one day I managed to get a botanist to join me for a walk along the path, and I was asking her about the leaf litter, and she said that, I'll just go back to this bit here, I was asking her why the edges of the sort of the puddles and the edges of the water look like they've got oil, and she said that the leaves, when they break down, they release oils. And that's why you often see rainbows on puddles and things. In natural environments, obviously you get it in the city because of cars and pollution, but deep in the forest, I couldn't think where the hell an oil had come from, but she said it's the natural oils from the leaves. And you can see here, this is a tree root that has grown over the surface of the concrete. And I love the way it framed that particular shape of concrete there. So here are, this is my new found language basically. There's like a new language on the path, it's a Twig language. And I found out by talking to Keith, my partner, about the I Ching, that Carl Jung had done an introduction to the I Ching in a British translation of it. And I really liked that relationship between Carl Jung's interpretation of society and the I Ching, the Chinese interpretation of serendipity and chance, because this looked like a message to me. They look like letters, it looked like somebody was telling me something, it almost looked like help for some reason, I don't know why, but I just stumbled across it one day and I thought, this is like a Twig language. And I regularly see the twigs landing in what looks like the forms of letters, and it just reminded me of the I Ching. You know, like pickup sticks, the way things land, and just the beauty of that, really, the beauty of the way the sticks land and the colours of them as well. And this is something else, I don't know where this is going to go, but it's about, it's like a little bell that goes off somewhere in my head. I don't know what it is, but something goes off and I think, wow, that's gorgeous, that's beautiful. There's something about that that I relate to on a really a deeper level than I understand almost. But I listen to that bell and I take notice of it. And this is a quote that I suppose resonates with what I'm saying, really, that it is about taking note and making a mark, but looking at the way that you relate to things on an emotional level. And this is a piece of a spinal column. What is a piece of spinal column doing in the middle of the path? Other than the probably red kite had dropped it or something like that, but it's just there, as was the magpie feather. And so the odd things that I find that are particularly unusual, I photograph. And this is what they must have done, I suppose, in the 40s. They must have had some sort of layer of tarmac or something that they placed over the path, but this looks like music or language again. So this this is my next phase. This, I suppose I've tried to put this talk in little blocks, as you can see, of areas of interest. And this is the shit series. This is bird shit. That is amazing. It is beautiful. It lands in the most exquisite forms. The shapes are amazing. And I love the sort of glistening whiteness of it against the concrete. So every time I'm up there, as soon as I see some bird shit has landed, and rarely is it on wet days because it gets washed out, but sometimes there is on rainy days. But I love the Jackson Pollock of it. They don't know what they're doing, these birds, but they're making these beautiful shapes. And there is the relationship with the lichens that I mentioned earlier on. So during the hedge project, there was lots of lichens up there, and I became really interested in the lichens. So the two have formed a sort of, they've merged in my head. I don't know why, but the lichens and the bird shit have come together in some way. And I made these little tiny shit books during lockdown because I was feeling fed up about, and so everything seemed like shit. So I made loads of little tiny shit books and messing about. And these are bigger. These are sort of A1. These are monoprints on Indian ink. Don't know what I'm going to do with those. And then looking at the lichen again. This is a detail of some of the lichen. And some of it's big and it's quite fat, sort of three-dimensional, so it's been there a long time. And during the hedge project, I managed to persuade the lichen specialist for this area, who came and looked at the lichen on the hedge, and he was telling me that lichens particularly like growing on bird shit because it's a good host for it. So this could be lichen that's developed on, I don't know. This is a really bad close-up, but you can see how spore-like it is, like mushroom-like. And so this is a textile homage, really, to lichen that I spent every evening for a couple of months sewing. It's probably a square A4. Yeah, I spent some time loving lichen, so I thought I should do a little textile homage to it. And this is the sort of the relationship between the two and how nicely they sit together, really. How those, I love shapes. Yeah, so the botanist that I mentioned earlier on, managed to get her to come and have a walk with me in March. And she helped me identify all of the plants that she could see that were growing along the path. So we wrote them all down, and tried to locate as many as we could that she knew of. But since then she's become poorly, so I haven't got a botanist, and I've tried everywhere to get a botanist. I want to work with a botanist, basically. So if anybody is a botanist out there or knows a botanist, please give them my details, because I want to walk regularly with a botanist who can give me intelligent information about the plants and hopefully open up another area of my knowledge. So these are all the flowering plants that I gathered in the summer. And I laid them on some cloth and hammered the life out of them. And this left these shadows, these colour shadows of them. I've no idea what I'm going to do with this. It was just, you know, another, like I say, it's another whip work in progress. But I particularly liked some of the more abstract, these sorts of things. The sort of shadows of the plants rather than the form and the shape itself, but the surroundings, the halo almost of it. So these are just close-ups of the textile pieces. I put it against glass to see through the textile. And the colours are quite amazing. These are images of some of the seeds and things, the detritus on the path, really. The pussy willow and how it blows and changes through the season. And just a tiny film of the light. I quite like the relationship between the light and the shapes of the pussy willow. And the pussy willow was phenomenal for about 3 weeks, really. It seemed to grip in particular places and create this little, it looked like lots of little islands that were gripping onto the cracks in the path. And the way that rose briar just stopped them, just held them in a line, really. And then as the pussy willows exploded, all the seed heads exploded all over the path. So the path became this sort of fluffy snow-like area for a few days, and then the rain came. And then when the hawthorn had all the flowers on the hawthorn, when they had all exploded, we had this huge wind. I think this was in May time, and the wind blew all of the flower petals into the cracks and into the little concrete holes as well. So yeah, this is a bit later in the year, and how the leaf litter is beginning to fall. This is sort of very late summer now. And so these are some monoprints using charcoal and soil and white ink. Because as Kate mentioned, you know, I really like edges of things and the sort of softness of edges, how nature very rarely has a very straight line, hard edge. There's a real gentleness about the finish of things. And they remind me of the air a bit. So there's a quality of air rather than earth. This is a bit of gold ink and then scratched through, and monoprints again with torn edges overlaid. Yeah, and the edges of the path again here. This is charcoal with soil monoprint. This is soil and gold ink monoprints. And this is me starting to print with soil, and these shapes are the shapes of the holes in the concrete path. So I've used the, I've used the soil to print the little shapes. And these are double imperial strips of paper that I was given a big ream of them. So that's why, because I'm given free paper, I try to just work with the paper I've got. But I just really like working in that landscape, the horizontal, and it worked for the hedge and it seems to work for the path as well. So I'm going with it. But I was really excited by the colour, because I don't know how it's going to print once I've mixed it up with a bit of Vaseline and what else do I use? I've got brain death now, it'll come back to me anyway. Whatever it is I use, I was really glad how dark some of the soil came out. Yeah, and these were done in, I think, when did it close down? October was whenever, I think the last couple of weeks, was it October? Yeah, these were October this year. So frustratingly, I was starting to do these. These aren't finished at all. These are just some of the experiments. And then we had another lockdown. This is charcoal, also using those rock pool cousin shapes. So I drew around the edges of the rock pools to get their shapes, basically. Made some charcoal ink. These I did at home back in, I think these were done in July, August this year. And it's Indian ink and bleach and monoprint, just using a Baron basically. Again, no studio. So, and these were the relationship I was mentioning earlier on between the lichen and the bird shit as well. So looking at how things, I used bleach because I was thinking about white and bleaching things out. That's a close-up of it. And this is what I'm sort of working on in my head at the moment, thinking about the overlay of things basically. These are the most exquisite shapes that remind me of Helen Frankenhaller's work, who is an abstract painter whose work I love. And here we have the fruits of the path. So there's sloes and all sorts of things that you find, the odd fruit now and again. And then the autumn leaves. And then this was about, I don't know, probably about 5 weeks ago along the path. It looks absolutely amazing at the moment. And I was just shocked at the change in colour from July, August to now, really. So this shows the path at its best. And that's it. So thank you very much for listening, everybody, and for joining in the Path Project chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. I don't know about everybody else, but I really feel like my blood pressure is so low now. I feel relaxed, I feel calm, I feel at peace. I think I've got to go and make friends with all the cracks in my patio. I think I need to stop weeding them and pay attention to what they need. I'm going to be pulling up those all those patio stones and just letting it go wild, I think. That's incredible. I mean, before we open the floor, there's something that when I was looking at your work, I love the term path pockets that you use for those little concrete, the dips in the concrete. There's something really special because pockets hold secrets and necessary things. But I like that you observe them being filled but washed out, and you're truly sort of scientific, kind of detached but very attached looking, and is really interesting. You are truly observing it as it is and allowing it to be, and recording it. And it seems, you know, it really feels important, actually, this focus on this detail. And your language is so familial. It's all about those relationships between, and that possessiveness. That made sense when you said you feel quite possessive of the path, and kind of like, you know, it's yours. That makes sense of all the language you use, because, you know, you use the term friends for all your forms and your work. And believe me, there's nobody keener to open for many reasons, but because I saw the start of those works that you were talking about on the landscape paper, I'm desperate to see where they're going to go. So the quicker we're open, the better, really.
Oh, thank you. That's fine.
Would anybody like to ask any questions? If you pop your hand up and we can come to you and you can unmute. I'll go through the little... Pauline, would you like to unmute and have a... Take your mute off, Pauline. Just on the bottom left, that's it. Okay, have you found it? Bottom left of your black box, it says you've got a little speaker sign and it's got a red line through it. If you click on it, it'll go green. Any luck? Has while Pauline's just figuring that out, has anybody else got any questions that they'd like to bring up? I've got some series of black boxes, so I'm not sure everybody's loading up. Oh, Zoe, here we go.
Oh, yeah, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And like you, I was so relaxed. It's so nice watching lovely familiar faces, but that was just what I do daily, as you probably all know now, is walk OB, and that's my headspace, my safety, my security, and that just fitted in so well with life. And it was just so lovely, and I love the shit books. That was so nice.
No.
All of it. Just fantastic. And I love the fabric, the sewing that you did. I wanted to ask Claire, could you give me the names of the two ladies' books that you've read, because they sound like I would love those, because I didn't quite get them down. There was Lucy Lippard, was it Overlay?
Oh, Lucy Lippard Overlay, yeah.
Yeah.
At the beginning you meant.
Yeah, and then Rebecca somebody.
Rebecca Solnit. She wrote a book called Wanderlust, History of Walking.
Yeah.
And you might also like a book called Braiding Sweetgrass.
That sounds nice.
By Robin Wall Kilmer. I read so many books during lockdown. My God, I just couldn't get enough books. I was desperate to read.
It's fed into your work so nicely, the fact that you looked at that path every week or a lot of days. It's just what I do at the moment in the woods, and it's just that has just really inspired me. So thank you so much. It's lovely, and it was lovely to see how it fits in and moves on from what you were doing on your hedge project as well.
Yeah, really thank
good.
you, Zoe. Thank you.
Pauline, have you figured out your... No. In the meantime, would anybody else like to raise their hand if they want to ask a question, interrogate it? Shirley, would you like to unmute?
Okay. Hi, I wasn't familiar with your work, so it was really lovely coming to the talk today, and I had a look at your Instagram. But I was wondering, because of the language and the use of language, whether you were kind of recording your own words, those descriptive bits of words that you were doing. It seemed quite a dominant thing as you were talking, and I just wondered whether those might creep into your work somehow.
I suppose they might creep in the titles of things, but I really like words and language because they're our tool as artists. They're the way that we can express what we're thinking to other people who aren't artists, perhaps. I love the creativity of them, of words and language, and how they can evoke different things for different people. So I either don't title things at all, or I want them to lead people into my work if possible. I'm sure all artists think the same, lots of artists like words and literature. But and as I mentioned, philosophy is really an important aspect of the way that I like to think about things. Yeah.
I think the I Ching reference was sort of came out of left field for me, but it didn't as well, because yeah, I think we all see twigs and things like that. And as humans, you can't help but think of language and think of, our brains are calculated to see messages, and you know, it's something so instinctive. But it did startle me when you said that spelt out help, and it was like, perhaps is that the way we're feeling, or is that the path? Maybe, I mean, the path doesn't need any help because it's going to be eaten up, actually, isn't it? I suppose by nature. So I suppose, yes, that is the path, really saying that, because it will lose eventually, won't it? Nature's very stubborn, and relentless, and just quietly pushing all the time. So what you're watching really is transformation and growth, but also decay, isn't it? On a couple of different levels. It's all there, isn't it? It's all there, especially for our times at the moment. Any more hands in the air for a few questions? Alison, would you like to unmute?
Hi Claire, it's lovely to see your work. I wanted to ask a bit about the fact that you walk that path every day or every week, and it's kind of quite a meditative activity. Do you ever kind of note down the kinds of emotions and feelings that you have on those walks, or is it more sort of subliminal, you know, when it comes to actually making a piece?
No, I've got one book that I take with me on walks, and I write everything that I see down. So is it Shirley, you asked earlier on about words? I write sort of blackberries or snow or everything I see that catches my attention. I write it down. So I've got a book that I write 16th of July or whatever, and I write all of those words down, and sometimes there are particular emotions. So the word help, when I saw help, it felt like me, because that was during the first lockdown, and so many things had gone wrong, as in cancelled or stopped, or, you know, during the first lockdown. I felt in a real state of distress as an artist, and I felt like I needed some help. And so the path was saying, yes, you need some help. The words were there actually on the path. So yeah, my emotions are noted, that I note them physically down in a book. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and sometimes the path seems to know as well, that it seems to sort of say, or echo was the word I was looking for. Yeah, it seems to echo what I'm feeling on the days that I'm there. I'm sure lots of walkers feel the same, you know, that, you know, walking on a rainy day, you feel invigorated when you come back. Sometimes other days you feel really morbid and moribund, you know, on other days.
Yeah, and another time sort of a walk can be, you can start with a thought, can't you, and you're meditating on something, or you're working something through about life or whatever, and by the end of the walk it's kind of shifted on your own thinking.
Yeah, like that quote from that the Eskimo custom was to walk until you came to the end of your, you know, your emotional journey. Basically, you can literally walk yourself through a series of thoughts. Or
Thank you.
This is nothing new. I know lots of philosophers. Apparently philosophers used to walk a lot. There are several philosophers. Wittgenstein used to walk every night, apparently, and it was a way of focusing on a series of ideas that they were trying to understand and come to terms with. Yeah, I suppose we're funny, the upright people.
I think, Anne Jacob, you've got your hand up on your screen. Would you like to?
Right. Yes. Hello. Oh, wait a minute. Right. Okay. Fine.
Oh, hello. I thought you were being shy.
I just wanted to ask Claire about. Your talk has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed that. What is the lichen reference that you made? Can you explain that, please?
I can't explain the whole of the I Ching. All I can say is that it's a Chinese form of a very ancient Chinese way of interpreting things. It's probably the
Oh,
quickest
right.
way. And
Yes.
then sticks, Chinese
Oh, right.
sticks,
Right. Yes.
as a way
Yes.
of interpreting, I don't know, reading the future, reading people, reading things
Yes.
that happen. And people often turn to the I Ching to read things.
Yes.
Carl
Yes.
Jung,
Oh,
he
yes.
wrote an
Yes.
introduction to a translation, a British translation of
Yes.
I Ching.
Yes. Okay. Okay. That's fine. And with regard to the botanist, have you tried the local university? Have you got, because they will have, I'm not so sure whether there isn't a botanist society. There certainly is an ecological society, and
Yeah, I have.
you've
I've been
tried.
in contact. Yeah, I've been in
Oh,
contact
right,
with
right.
2 or 3 lecturers, and
Yeah,
I have. Yeah, thank
yeah.
you for the reference. I have tried.
No, 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 no. Yeah, okay. Well, good luck.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Any more questions from anybody? Any more little paws in the air? Oh, Pauline, you're still struggling with your... If you want to pop it onto chat, Pauline, I can always read it out. Down at the bottom is the little speech bubble. If there's no more hands in the air, I'll just come back to put no. Nothing yet. Okay, so but I think we'll wrap there if everybody's okay and has had what they would like from that. I think it's more than I was looking for, actually. I feel very very replete, I think is the word. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to you, Claire, for your time and your generosity, being part of the festival. It feels so right that you're here, and your work is at such an exciting stage. It's really lovely to have a little peek at the path, and it's certainly it's sort of, yeah, I think it probably confirms what we all feel, because we're all here in the same place, and that it's okay to observe in this much detail, and it's okay to be quite possessive over a bit of land, or you know, a little plot, and have a friendship with it, because it does feel right. And at the moment, these times, you know, reaching out to nature can only do us good, can't it? So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Been absolute pleasure, and I'm sure everybody will join me.
Thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome, and we will do our best to get open for you, because I really want to see where those path pockets go.
Yeah, I can't wait. Yeah,
I know. I'll pay more attention to you mixing your soil as well, because that's fascinating. It was beautiful.
thank you. Thanks very much.
Anyway, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for joining us. Okay, and a copy of this will go up on our website, and take advantage of all the stuff that's been put up there for free at www.makeprints.co.uk. Okay, thanks ever so much, and I'll end the meeting now. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Take care, everybody. Bye.